pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thanks. I just want to take a quick moment, and again, we oftentimes just speak, but sometimes I think that the power of prayer, regardless of what religion you are, whether you believe in God or not, I think prayer and just taking time to reflect on things that have happened in our community and to pray to whatever God that you so choose to pray to. But I think taking a time and a moment of prayer for peace, for unity. I think everybody loves our country, loves the people in our country, but we need to make sure that we know that we love each other. And I think we need guidance from above, love from above. And so I just want to take a moment to pray for that peace, for that guidance, and for that wisdom as we move forward into the future. Thank you, Lord. Thank you all.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. We thank you for joining us here today. As a courtesy to those in attendance and to facilitate the conduct of our business, we ask that you turn off or silence all electronic devices at this time. Madam Clerk.
Items 6 to 8 can be considered together for Lakeview 168, located northwest of 168th Street and Kansas Avenue. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 6, an ordinance to rezone this property from AG District to R4 District. Item 7, a resolution to approve the final plat for Lakeview 168. Item 8, a resolution to approve the Lakeview 168 subdivision agreement.
The public hearing on agenda on items 6 through 8 begin at this time. Are there any proponents?
Mr. President, members of the council, John Fullenkamp, 11440 West Center Road. And I guess I haven't been here a while, so I don't know where to put my plat. But this is...
Stand the arm up and put it where you always did.
Same place?
And then you zoom in and out on top of the device, Mr. Fullenkamp. There you go.
Perfect. There you go. This is new subdivision of Celebrity Homes at 168th and Kansas Avenue, which is between Fort and Ida on the west side of the road next to Flanagan Lake. Comes to you with the recommendation of the department. I'd be happy to answer any questions. There's 136 lots in this first phase.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Melton. Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 6 through 8 are approved 7-0.
Thank you.
Item 9, an ordinance to rezone property located at 3161 and 3165 Leavenworth Street from GI District to CC District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 9 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Second, roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 9 is approved 7-0. Item 10, an ordinance to rezone property located at 1610 Dorcas Street from GC District to R7 District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on item 10 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 10 is approved 7-0. Item 11, an ordinance to rezone property located at 6048 Brittle Path from DR District and R2 District to R2 District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 11 begins at this time. Is Roger Carroll ready?
He's having difficulty connecting.
Okay. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Second. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 11 is approved, 7-0. Item 12, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the MCC overlay district to incorporate into that district the property located southwest of George B. Lake Parkway and West Key Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 12 begins at this time. We have Mr. Zadina.
Hello, hi, Joe Zadina with Lamper Anderson, 14710 West Dodge Road, on behalf of Millwood Public Schools to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Please come forward, provide your name and address and the basis for your opposition.
Thank you. Brian and Kathy Cowles, 5658 South 209th Circle, Coventry Estates.
Would you do me a little favor and just raise the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
No problem. Our concerns are, we're really for the expansion and them kind of things, but we have some concerns that's going to affect our neighborhood, particularly the Coventry Estates area that's directly east of the new development. And some of the questions and concerns that we have are the proposed hours for the site to be 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. And we think that may have some adverse effects on the residents of Coventry Estates. So we want to try to talk through and maybe propose some different timing for that may allow for the subdivision to get some sleep, maybe a little bit before 11 o'clock at night.
And we realize too that maybe it's not going to be every day that it's going to be used 5 to 11 at night, but 11 o'clock at night, in our view, and we sit just directly adjacent to off of George B. Lake, it would directly affect us. So that's one of the concerns. Do you want us to go through our concerns first?
Yes.
Each one?
And I'm sure I have Mr. Zadina writing a list. First is the
Okay.
park
Okay.
hours.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
The other one is the waiver that they're applying for the elevation of the building there, which is a 55-foot waiver that they're looking for, and I don't think that's the total elevation of the facility that they want to build. And talking with some of the residents of Coventry, they feel that it will impact just their overall feeling and view of the neighborhood and things going west of us, that we can't have the same
Aesthetics.
aesthetics that
basically.
we've had and we've been used to all the years.
Okay, height for the plans.
The third one, and I believe it's in the literature that we received, that there's going to be additional parking for 670 cars. And so that's actually going to kind of correlate into some of our other issues and concerns that comes to traffic control. Who's going to control traffic when we have these big events? One of the concerns too is it going to be traffic in and out on George B. Lake Parkway. There's no traffic signal there.
And
And
that's a two-lane road only built for traffic coming in and out of the community itself, not for general public use.
correct. No traffic signals there. Again, security presence during all of these events, is that OPD doing security for that? How would traffic be policed in and out? You want to do that one?
Yep. Then there's the issue of stadium lighting and them kind of things, especially going till 11 o'clock at night. And I know there's a lot of new technologies out there that will direct the lighting straight down. But as we sit in our backyards and look to the west, we'll be looking directly up into them lights, and there's no way to avoid that. So I don't know if that's something that can also be addressed.
Let's do this one last.
And then we have a real concern about parking and security around the facility. There is in the proposal, there's a 30-foot buffer for the west side of the property, but in the proposal doesn't say anything about the east side of the property and any buffer. So we're concerned about all of our houses have cul-de-sacs, and people will park in them cul-de-sacs and walk straight across the street into the ball fields and them kind of things. So is there any plans for a fencing or type of security that's going to keep the public out of our neighborhood and finding an easy way into the facilities? So that's one of our concerns.
You want to do fencing?
Go ahead. I already did the
okay.
fencing.
And then in all the literature, there was also talk about the tree plantings and planting of overstory trees. And I would just want clarification on what's their definition of overstory trees and what varieties and what caliper those would be when those go in and how many. I know on the schematics, I want to know if, or the residents would like to know if on the schematic, if that's accurate, the number of trees that are going to be planted, so.
Anything else?
Yes, just one more for me, I'm sorry. They are gonna extend X Street across
yeah.
George B. Lake, and looks like it's a street to nowhere. It just goes to the edge of the new property, and it just stops there, and we don't know if there's any new plans, future plans to develop that area any further, and how that's gonna impact everybody else going forward, especially neighbors to the west.
Okay.
Okay?
And
I'm gonna
neighbors,
put that in as the connection stub as your question. So we have
Okay.
the
Okay.
connection stub, we have fencing, lighting, security, traffic control, traffic parking, height of the building, and hours of operation.
Yep.
Yes.
And,
Okay.
you know, the other one, that with traffic control, it really concerns us that everything coming in on George B. Lake, that there's no way in and out of there. And there is one other thing, and I think I lost my train of thought. But it's really, and I guess I can't remember what it was, but
That's right.
there's one other
Okay.
thing, it's just a minor thing.
Well, why don't you take a seat nearby?
Okay.
We'll call to see if there's any other opponents who wish to testify, and then we'll have Mr. Zadina try to answer your questions.
Okay, thank
And we
you.
might have Public Works or some other people too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, go ahead. Are there any other opponents?
Council, yes, I live in the neighborhood as well.
Oh, whoa, we can't have you participate that way. You have to come down and tell your name and address, and if you echo what was just said, or you want to add anything yourself, go right ahead.
Just add or continue as well. I live in the neighborhood.
Your
My
name
name's
and
Rod Larson. And again, I'm on the east side as well, along the area that will be where the ball fields will be placed.
Mr.
So
Larson, what's your address?
21025, so 21025 W Circle.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I want to echo what was brought up to the attention today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Mr. Zadina, would you please respond?
Thank you. Sorry I'm not there in person, everyone. I took down notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 items. A lot of the items, certainly, so we had held a public meeting back at Horizon High in April, and then we or perhaps even March, and had some of these comments without having Millard Public Schools alongside me, since I'm calling in from home. The hours of operation, would you like me to go through each item individually?
Yes, concisely.
Okay. Yep. So hour of operation, I think we can negotiate, talk again with Millard Public Schools. They have not had a facility like this in the past where it's kind of a new activity center and a new space for them. So I think there's some flexibility in those hours. So I'd be willing to have a conversation with the neighbors about that, furthering that conversation. The height, yes, we are aware of the height. That's why I think we acknowledge that in the special use permit submittal for the height to be approved. Parking, there's currently 299 stalls. We're going to double that capacity, of which is supported by the City of Omaha Planning Department for the parking count. Traffic, be more than happy to share a traffic study. We completed a traffic study, coordinated with Mr. Haas and his team on this study, and provided, that the only improvements were as requested for X Street. No signal was warranted at the time. Security, I don't know. I'm sorry I can't say about security for events in the Omaha Police Department or who will be attending or how that will be handled. I'll have to ask Millard Public Schools. Lighting, the gentleman was absolutely correct. We will use LED lighting that controls spill, but due to elevation, you may still encounter some lighting from your home. I'd like to think that wouldn't happen. I don't think there's any access easements through the cul-de-sacs to George B. We're equally as concerned. That's why we try to put as much parking on site so that we can avoid anybody parking along the street. So we will, this kind of ties into some of the fencing. We're going to make sure that we accommodate fencing. appropriately, both for managing activities and events, but also securing the property. So there is a fencing plan that I can share with the neighbors. Let's see here, lighting and then tree planting. We will certainly follow the city code. We've worked with Tim Freeze and Landscape Group with the city on the requirements, and we will meet every requirement the city has for mitigation of trees and planting of new trees. And we can clarify what that is by providing the neighbors with some code, some excerpts from the code, so they know what to expect. And then X Street, road to nowhere, through that is being required to put in part of the plat acknowledging that it isn't a road to nowhere, but it's a
Joe?
mechanism.
Joe, you were garbling there on your most recent response, so if you could repeat that one, I'd appreciate it.
I'm sorry, on the tree planting?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So for the tree planting, we will meet the city's requirements and code. And I think the easiest way to clarify for the neighbors is for us to provide them a copy of what we will be doing and what the code is requiring.
So you're going to provide a copy of what you're doing and comply with the code?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And,
Anything else?
Just on X Street, we will provide X Street connection, dead end connection as required by the Public Works Department.
For future development, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask the planning director, Dave Fanslaw, to come up and provide a bird's eye view of what's going on and why we're hearing what we're hearing in terms of this project. Mr. Fanslaw.
Sure. Yeah, Dave Fanslaw, City Planning. What I put on the screen is the site plan out of our file. It shows the field improvements, shows the activity center that Joe talked about, new parking, and that is the new X Street to be put in.
Okay. And so do you have anything to add to the answers that Mr. Zadina gave?
No, I think Joe covered it well. The use, the change of, the additional uses on this site were part of a conditional use permit, which Planning Board has already approved. As one of those conditions for that conditional use permit, we required the MCC overlay, so that's what's before you today.
And for the benefit of the people who came and may be listening, would you explain the major commercial corridor overlay and what that's about and the purpose?
Sure, yeah. So the MCC, the Major Commercial Corridor Overlay, is part of the Urban Design Code, Article 22 in zoning code. MCC speaks to extra landscaping, improvements, better signage, and probably most importantly is building design. So, you know, no more cinder blocks, but architecturally pleasing materials for the buildings.
Okay. And that particular code, the Urban Design Review Code, is the highest of the architectural and design standards that the city has within its menu of codes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Take that down. Councilmember Melton.
Thank you, and I think that brings up a good point, if you could come right back up, sorry.
That's all right.
People see projects on here and people actually think we're voting to approve or not approve the building of the project. And I always like to go back to look at what are we actually voting for.
Sure.
So today, we're not voting on whether or not Millard should be able to build this today. We're voting on whether or not it should be a part of the MCC district, meaning you have extra requirements for the building.
Correct.
So if, just hypothetically, if we were to vote no, it just means that they could actually build a building that didn't look as nice and wouldn't have to have all the landscaping. By voting for this, we're ensuring that whatever they build is gonna be of higher quality with better landscaping and the like, correct?
Mostly correct.
Okay,
The MCC ensures that maybe future buildings and uses are built to standards. These included, but the use that the use that Planning Board voted on, the conditional use permit,
Right.
we already have building elevations, everything meets MCC. This is just kind of formalizing that design, those design standards and the zoning overlay on this parcel. But through the conditional use permit, we can dictate that as well.
Okay, and that's why I just want to be clear on what we're actually voting on.
Right, right. So if it was just a straight, if there was no use permit involved at the planning board level, and this was just a straight rezoning from R4 to R4 MCC, absolutely, yes, that would ensure that those standards are met.
But I just wanted to be clear, because some of the opponents were talking about traffic and the hours of operation and things like that. But what we're voting on here today has nothing to do with that. It just has to do whether it's
Correct.
going to be part of the MCC overlay district.
Correct.
Okay,
Absolutely.
and that, it's confusing for people.
sure.
Because they just see a project on our agenda and think that we're voting on the details of the project
Right.
or their hours of operation or something like that. And we don't, that's not part of anything that we can do here at the council.
Not on this case, you're correct, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
In parlance or nomenclature, that ship has sailed because the planning board, when it reviewed this proposal, they approved what we see is in terms of the site plan and the building and the parking. So we're just voting on confirming what they've agreed to build to the standard will in fact be the standard
Yeah.
by law.
Yeah.
So,
A rezoning to include the overlay.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Fanslau. What's the pleasure of the council? Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 12 is approved, 7-0. Item 13, a resolution to approve a major amendment to a special use permit to allow a cemetery in the R4 district located at 5226 South 46th Street and 4601 Q Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Now, special use permits come to the council. Conditional use permits go to the planning board. So for those that are following along and paying attention to the agenda, this is why we are now considering this one as opposed to the planning board. Call for public hearing to open. All those who wish to testify as proponents. Opponents. We have
My name
Mr. Is it Saniuk?
Yes.
Please proceed.
My name is Joe Saniak, AO 4610 Dodge Street, on behalf of Catholic Cemeteries. Here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 13 is approved, 7-0. Item 14, an application to consider a Class CK liquor license for Heirloom Fine Foods located at 325 North 72nd Street, Suite 200. A is communication from the Planning Department regarding permits for the outdoor area.
The public hearing on item 14 begins at this time. Mr. Rosa.
Hello, my name is Anthony.
Your last name and address?
Sorry, my last name is Rosa. Address is 325 North 72nd Street, Suite 200, 68114.
We had some preliminary discussions at the pre-council, and I'm sure Mr. Festerson has some questions for you, so you might
Okay.
Be prepared for that, okay? Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. Yeah, Mr. Rosa, just a couple of questions for you. I was trying to place the exact location of this. Is this just south of the Walgreens building?
Yes,
And is it
it's located directly behind the urgent care.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. There's kind of a vacant space in the second half of that building, right?
Correct.
And you want to describe a little bit about what your business plan is and what you intend to do there?
Yes, sir. We have moved from from Chicago back to Omaha, where my wife and I are both from. We're a family-owned business. Basically, what our idea is to source food locally from farmers and serve our guests organic food and healthy food. Basically, what we do is catering, meal prep services, and now that we're having this new location, we're going to get into cooking classes and small events.
Great. And you may have an outdoor area? What are you thinking there?
We do have an outdoor area. What I have done so far is spent my whole entire quarantine gardening this beautiful space. It was bare, and I've spent a lot of my time planting heirloom plants, such as tomatoes, peppers, to kind of keep that as like a shtick, but basically hopefully turn this into like a small event space, like in the summer and spring and early fall, to kind of have, like I said, small events outside.
Okay. Well, that sounds good, and I think that's a nice business plan for that area right there. Obviously, you'd be sensitive to surrounding neighbors with any music you might be having or things of that nature in the evenings.
Yes, sir. In our location, there's really no residents near us. I know there's plans in the next couple of years to be building that furniture store into a 5-story skyrise. I don't foresee music being a nuisance. Plus, my wife and I are very modest, so we will never be playing music much louder than our guests can't talk to each other.
Great. And so I see that planning department, I think, recommends we attach, that the proper permits be obtained to do that should you proceed with it, and I'm sure that's fine by you, right?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, with that, I'll go ahead and move approval, subject to permits needed if there's an outdoor area.
Roll call.
Festerson.
Yes.
Gray. Harding.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 14 is approved, 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the city council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the city council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the city council rules of order.
The public hearings on agenda items 15 through 20 were held on June 9, 2020. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
The public hearings on agenda items 21 through 32 are today. If you wish to address the city council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or opponent. The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Items 33 and 34 can be considered together. Resolutions to approve the implementation of dockless shared scooter operating agreements with Spin and Bird.
The public hearings were continued on these items from the June 9 City Council meeting. This time, I'd call for any additional proponents.
Hi, good afternoon, members of the council. My name's Keegan Korf. I reside at 1936 South 37th Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68104. I'm here today speaking as a proponent for resolution numbers 33 and 34 on behalf of the Metro Smart Cities Initiative and Omaha by Design. As a resident of Omaha and someone who works in the transportation and technology space, I've learned that the word scooters is almost always used as an expletive or an exclamatory. Residents of Omaha are either thrilled to hear about scooters or they mutter the word under their breath, along with several other swears. But love them or hate them, the data is there to prove the success of last year's pilot. The pilot report published in January of 2020 by Park Omaha shared 3 main goals: to determine whether and how to allow dockless shared scooter services on a longer-term basis, to implement and develop mechanisms for regulating dockless micromobility devices, particularly with regard to key issues of public safety and parking compliance, and finally, to use data from the pilot to inform transportation planning decisions. Through each bump in the road along the way, no pun intended, these goals were met, and they were met with the opportunity to further explore how to continue to improve efficiency of their micromobility services. The mayor's willingness to support launching an additional pilot to further gauge the interest, opportunity, and most importantly, the potential for increased access to mobility among carless folks in our community shows a commitment to a progressive, active transportation planning initiative. In our radically changing world, the option of increased access to micromobility options provides a safe, socially distanced way to get from point A to point B while contributing to environmental sustainability. Both SPIN and BIRD's operating agreements share a commitment to riders' safety and education, in addition to aligning with the goals of the Metro Smart Cities initiative, which are to increase access to employment, education, healthcare, and amenities, to promote community engagement of and education around the transportation benefits of the region, and to revitalize the urban core. SPIN and BIRD both create affordable opportunities for all community residents to engage with micromobility transportation options. SPIN's Access program allows for eligible users to receive services at a 50% discount and allows for opportunities for unbanked community residents to purchase a SPIN Access card with cash at partner locations. BIRD collaborates with city officials and community leaders to determine how to best serve areas of unemployment and underemployment. One example is a campaign launched in Washington, D.C. to provide eligible riders unlimited rides for just $5 per month. SPIN has committed to working with Metro Transit and other community stakeholders to identify and serve key locations that could benefit from our scooter share programs, such as commuter hubs and other neighborhoods lacking transit service. SPIN provides translated services for riders in a variety of languages, including Spanish, Burmese, and Karen, which are hugely important here in Omaha, among nearly 30 other languages. While helmet laws do not exist in Omaha, there is an understanding that helmets are a best practice for safety, and each company has a plan detailed to addressing helmet distribution, both paid and free options, to again ensure equity to access. SPIN provides free helmets upon request and distributes them at monthly education events. BIRD also provides free helmets and promotes their helmet selfie campaign, where upon finishing a ride, you can snap a selfie in your helmet, upload it, and receive incentives such as free ride credits. A lack of access to helmets could provide inequitable consequences for someone riding a bike or scooter out of necessity. Cycling advocates will tell you that helmets should not be necessary, as it should be the role of a city to collaborate with the community to create safe, accommodating, multimodal infrastructure for cyclists and scooters. And this is part of the work of the Metro Smart Cities initiative. Coming to you all at City Council very soon will be a proposal which will complement the second scooter pilot. The Metro Smart Cities Initiative and Bike Walk Nebraska have been hard at work to develop Omaha's first protected bikeway pilot. The final details are wrapping up, and you'll learn more very soon. The hope is that in creating a safe, protected space to support street riding for both bikes and scooters, the 18-month or so, give or take, pilot will provide vital data and feedback for potential future infrastructure. BIRD's RFP even mentioned an opportunity to potentially collaborate with the city on a revenue sharing project to support developing additional active infrastructure projects. So there's a lot of opportunity there. On behalf of the Metro Smart Cities Initiative and Omaha by Design, we kindly request that you approve Resolutions 33 and 34, approving the operating systems of SPIN and BIRD so that a second pilot for scooters can hit our streets this summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corr. Are there any other proponents here that wish to testify in favor?
Hello, Manny Cook, 5607 North 37th Street. I just wanted to echo what Keegan said. I'll keep mine short and simple though. I am an advocate for all forms of mobility for all types of people. But I want to just mention that during the last pilot, I noticed that the scooters were not really located in North Omaha. There was one time when they were put in North Omaha, that was for Native Omaha Days, and that was because I asked for them. Since then they weren't. So I just hope that going forward that there's a explicit effort to have those available for people living there. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now go to Frank Speak with SPIN and ask if you have anything to add to the testimony that SPIN provided last week.
Thank you very much. Frank Speak. I am the Director of Government Partnerships at SPIN. Our warehouse address is 802 Pierce Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68102. I'm here to answer any questions that council members might have. I just wanted to say, thank you for considering SPIN to be a part of the second pilot program. We operated in the pilot program last year, and we thought it was very successful, and we're very excited for the opportunity to build on the investment and partnership that we have with the Omaha community. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. We'll next move to Blanca Laborde with Bird. Do you have anything to add from last week's testimony?
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Blanca Laborde. I am with Bird Rides. Thanks again for the opportunity to provide micromobility services to the people in Omaha. We very much look forward to our launch and very much look forward to further collaboration with the city, the residents, and the staff of Omaha. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any opponents who wish to testify?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska. I'm opposed to both of these ordinances for two basic reasons. First of all, under today's environment and the uncertainty over whether the city and the county and the state has enough money coming to them from the federal government and how they're going to share it, whether we need to even be spending any money on scooters that are not necessary. The other reason is I'm not an expert or a lawyer, but if bicyclists have to have helmets, I know motorcycles motors above a certain power gonna have helmets. But if these scooters are gonna be on the street at all and going 10, 15 miles an hour or more, I would think they have to meet the state law and also have helmets. So please reconsider some of your things here on that. And I'd also like to take maybe 30 seconds to repeat my testimony this morning in relation to last week, or would I be out of order?
If you're not on items 33 and 34,
Okay.
then you can't.
Well, I'll submit this to you in writing then, as a protest
All right.
based on last week.
Thank you, Mr. Storr.
You can
Are there
read
any other opponents?
Thank you.
Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Excuse me.
Oh,
I was
I'm
an
sorry, I
opponent.
didn't see you, Mr. Jimenez.
3306 Bird Street, Luis Jimenez. I'm not going to belabor this because it's probably going to get passed. But I have been opposing this since I heard about it. And I've asked people I know if they use the scooters, and the vast majority of people say no, they don't use scooters. I don't know anybody that said yes, that they use the scooters. Aside from that, I am not against micromobility and getting to where you need to go. I use the Heartland B-Cycle. I prefer the electric bikes, and I got a year membership. However, I've been in accidents with my bike by myself, and I am kind of nervous because I remember how I fell, and it hurt one time. The bike landed on top of me, and it's happened a few times. And so I appreciated last week when you guys considered having people who are on the scooters wear a helmet. I think that's important. I think that, I just think it makes sense, especially the experience that I had on a bicycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President. Had a couple of questions both on the agreement, the RFP, as well as maybe some questions for both Spin and Bird. So if you'll just bear with me. First, I want to thank Ms. Corr for her letter because it actually addresses a lot of the questions I was going to have and very succinctly covered, and I appreciate that. But so Jennifer Taylor, I don't know if on the RFP or the agreement, I had a couple of questions. I'm not sure how, if you want to take those or.
Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. Councilman Harding, I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions I can, and I think Hannah's here too.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. So I think it was Vice President Palermo last week brought up something about the finances too. I know in the agreement it says that each participant, pilot or Bird and Spin, are paying a pilot program fee of $7,000. I think the RFP asked for $10,000. Was kind of curious how that got reduced, and then marry that with the Schedule B or Exhibit B, and explain to me the pricing. I know some people, you had some questions about how it costs the city money, or it didn't cost the city money, or it's going to break even, so I'd like to have that on the record.
I'm going to defer to Hannah.
Sorry,
on that.
Hannah, yeah, I know I should have called on Hannah first.
Hannah Depanou, Public Works. So in response to your question regarding the application fee, we did reduce it like we did last year because the pilot program period is condensed to less months than what we anticipated originally.
Okay.
In response to the parking fees, we believe that this is kind of a progressive way of going at making sure that we're capturing the costs of this program. And so what we're looking at here are different areas in your agreements that you can look at where we would charge different types of fees, and we hope that that will get our companies to have a more active fleet management style. So where we would like the lower areas to be would be in the areas where we have that first and last mile next to parking garages, and other locations where it would be next to transit stations and stuff like that, where those areas would be free. Beyond that, we have medium zones, high zones, and auto enforcement zones where we would collect the majority of the fees, and that would be per parking session. So when somebody gets off a scooter and they park it in a medium, high, and not auto enforcement zone, because we intend to not allow parking in those areas. But in the medium and high areas, we would capture the fee for those time periods that are spelled out in your Exhibit B.
So would those fees also apply to the, if you will, the original placement of in the day of operation?
It is our intent to do so. We would anticipate that the scooter companies would try to utilize the low areas or preferred parking areas.
Okay, so it does start with that first placement of the scooter each day?
Yes, we anticipate it to do so.
And what's the anticipated revenues and the anticipated expenses to operate the pilot program as it relates to the city?
So it would depend largely on, where the scooters would get parked as far as what we would collect in fees. But we have tried to create some more efficiencies in the way that we operate. A majority of the fees that we incurred last year were staff time, and I think that would be roughly the same this year. We've learned the tricks of the trade, if you will, and so we would probably spend a little bit less time, but you can probably see roughly the same amount of expenses as we did last year.
But I'm assuming the program was pro forma, though, to know what the anticipated or expected revenues would be to the city.
We haven't directly calculated that, but I can certainly provide that to you. I would express that what Ken said last week, we definitely anticipate breaking even. We're working with Spin on some advertising revenue for their Spin hubs, and that will be an agreement that would go into place in addition to this.
Okay, I was going to ask something about the Spin hubs later, but I'll say that for the Spin people too.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's what I needed from you, Hannah, but Jennifer, I think I did have a couple questions for you, please.
Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department.
One question I had, I've got a list, but it's not in any particular importance, but so in the agreement, there's something that's referred to as small vehicles, and it's capitalized, so I would assume there would have been a definition for it, but I couldn't find that anywhere, and that's at the bottom of it's actually, what is that, section 4E double I.
Okay. I'm going to, without even looking at it, yep, there it is. I'm going to tell you that you've identified a typo.
Okay, so that's supposed to be shared scooters.
It's supposed to be shared scooter. I had two of those typos in there. I apparently caught one, didn't catch the other.
Okay. Last year, I think a number of us were not probably pleased with the way the geofencing was kind of explained to us, and then in practice how it was utilized. Can you explain the differences in the geofencing this year, whether it's the slowing of the speed, stopping of the speed, drive-through areas, or no drive at all areas?
I will do my best to do that, and I'll let the representatives also weigh in,
Okay.
as well as Hannah. Last year, I think some of the confusion was a result of the city and city staff not really fully understanding how scooters work to begin with. So that confusion obviously is not going to carry over to this year. We have a much better understanding of how they work, what works for us, what types of geofencing will be appropriate, whether it's no park zones, slow down zones, et cetera. So again, I apologize for what was kind of a misunderstanding and miscommunication on behalf of city staff last year. But I don't foresee that being a problem this year. We've spent a great deal of time working with SPIN and also with BIRD on how to make sure that we geofence our areas appropriately, and we make sure that riders stay safe, because that's some of the concerns, as well as making sure that we make every effort to keep scooters out of the areas we want to keep them out of. To that extent, I know, in having worked with SPIN, particularly last year, and in talking to BIRD as well, that they are simply looking to the city and to Park Omaha for direction as to exactly how we want to implement those particular no-ride zones, whether we want them to be no park zones or slow-down zones or anything else. Both of the RFPs from both companies have extensive explanations as to what they're capable of doing. All they're looking to us for, and I confirmed that in even talking to Frank this morning, they're looking to us for direction. So Park Omaha will be giving them the maps and telling them these zones are slow-down zones, these are no park zones. So as soon as we tell them what that is, they are prepared to implement that. In addition, both companies are prepared to provide, I think, test drives to the city, so that we understand that once they put those geofence zones in place, the scooters actually operate the way we want them to before they launch. But again, I think Frank and Blanca can expand on that, as well as Hannah. If there's anything you want to add, Hannah?
I will say that our team has talked with both companies, and they are both prepared to slow down and or stop scooters in those areas, particularly for the auto enforcement zones. We would ask them to initially slow to a stop for those zones. So Old Market, Mecca, and the ones in Exhibit C.
All right, thank you. And I'll ask Spin and Bird about that in a minute, but thank you. I wanted to make sure we got that on the record as well, too. I'll say, too, I think there's enough, or in this agreement, there is also flexibility for the ability to make changes as we go during this pilot program, as we encounter situations that need to be addressed. So it offers that flexibility for the city to make those changes with the two scooter companies.
Definitely, yes. And we learned last year as well that the whole point of the pilot program is for us to learn how people use scooters and what works best for the city. So we want to make sure that we have a certain amount of flexibility within the agreement and within our working relationships with both SPIN and BIRD, so that we can produce, I guess, the best program possible and get the best results possible, so that we can make a better decision when we're done with this pilot program about how we want to move forward.
Okay. Is the call for when it's inclement weather and scooters are not to be placed, is that the call of the city, or is that the call of the scooter companies?
I will let SPIN and BIRD address that specifically as well. We do have language in the agreement that specifically states in certain types of inclement weather they are not to deploy scooters.
Right, but I was interested to know who makes that decision. Is that the city that makes that decision, or is it up to the discretion of the scooter company?
I'm not sure how that worked last year. I did actually add some language to the inclement weather section this year to be a little bit more specific about what kinds of weather scooters are not allowed in. So obviously, should a scooter company deploy in times of heavy rain, snow, blizzard, although I'm hoping we don't have snow in June and July, that would be a violation of the agreement.
Okay. Are the scooters taxed at all? Is that part of any of the pricing?
No, with the fee schedule that's attached is the fee schedule that we're using for this program.
Okay. Okay, I think that's, I appreciate it, thank you. So I'll ask Frank if, I'll start with Spin if that's okay. I just had some questions I wanted to go through with the scooter companies. Has Spin ever terminated either an agreement during a pilot program or a long-term commitment with any other party that it's agreed to operate your product?
Thank you, Councilmember Harding, for the question. No.
Okay. And tell me then, how is the monitoring done? You will have people in Omaha monitoring whether, a scooter becomes inoperable, or if riders are taking it in places where they're not supposed to be. Tell me how that works.
Yep, so that's a great question. So at Spin, we hire full-time W-2 employees to monitor and operate our scooters. We hire locally. So currently we have 5 employees that have already been hired and are ready to go as soon as we're given permission from Park Omaha to deploy to manage our fleet. These are going to be the individuals that are deploying the scooters every morning and then taking them off the streets in the evening. And then during the day, they'll be rebalancing the scooters throughout the areas. We also have a 24/7 customer support line where either residents or city officials can reach out to. Well, the city officials will have our managers' direct contact information, but if other community groups or residents want to complain about a scooter or report a scooter that is out of compliance, that then gets funneled down to our operations team, and they'll take care of that immediately. In addition to other safeguards or practices that Spin has for monitoring or controlling our fleet, geofencing is another example. I know that that's been discussed in the previous city council hearing. And then also Spin Hubs, which is a really exciting project that we're working on with the city, incorporating this in this year's program. And the real exciting thing about incorporating the Spin Hubs is the way in which you can incentivize and curb user behavior to end their trip at one of these hubs. We can offer discounted rides for users who, instead of leaving their scooter, in a random portion of in the city, we can offer them a 50% off discount if they end it at the hub. And it's a benefit for Spin because those stations actually charge the scooter. So it helps us on our operating costs, and it helps everyone in terms of ensuring that the program's going to be sustainable long-term, and also eases the burdens that the city has in terms of managing compliance and as well.
I was going to ask a little bit more about the hub later, but as long as you're bringing it up now too. I think one of the other benefits of the hub, at least as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually probably helps in some ways to reduce the clutter, because with the hub station, if you will, I'm not sure how many scooters actually can fit on a hub station, but it allows then for kind of the, to end the ride and put it, as you said, on the hub. And so it's more of, it's a cleaner look, I'll say.
Yeah, absolutely. And Spin Hubs is something that we partner both with cities and installing them on the public right away, but then also identifying, private property owners that want to find ways in which they can drive additional foot traffic to their business. And so, Spin Hubs play a value there as well. But yes, at the very least, this is one of the platforms that we wanted to offer as a company, because we know that one of the downsides in the industry that we need, in terms of a problem that we need to address, is scooter clutter. And especially when issues come up with ADA compliance, those are things that we take very seriously. And the hubs are a great way at managing that and addressing those issues.
Yeah, and I think clutter was certainly one of the big complaints last year too. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And as I referred to Ms. Korf's comments earlier too, the opportunity of maybe some revenue generation off of sharing of ad sales that go along with some of the hubs. So I think you've kind of addressed geofencing, and I won't belabor that one anymore. One of the things that I do have a question, I'm probably going to have to circle back to the city too, is, and you touched on it, maybe I think I heard you say that some of these scooters then wouldn't have to be picked up every night. But I think there's a requirement in the agreement that because of COVID, and this pilot program will be going on during COVID, that they're supposed to be sanitized every night too. So if they're not being picked up every night, how are they being sanitized?
No, so I apologize if I misspoke. So the scooters are picked up every night, and we have robust sanitation protocols in place to where every scooter will be sanitized before it's redeployed the next day. Just the benefit of the spin hubs themselves is when a user ends their trip at one of those locations, they can charge the scooter. So which means that there's less vehicles out on the street that might be running low on batteries, and it also provides the benefit of just giving people that reliability of always having scooters at this one location where the hub is installed. But yes, to your point, the sanitation is a requirement, and the scooters will be picked up every evening and sanitized before they're deployed the next day.
Thank you. And the last question for you then is, if you might want to take just a quick, 30 seconds or so, explain, at least as part of your response, and how SPIN will be trying to help out with job creation and employment strategies.
Yeah, great question. So, like I said, we have 4 full-time employees already onboarded at SPIN. They've already been trained, and we hire locally to manage this fleet. The permit allows us to operate up to 750 scooters. So initially we wanted to deploy a limited fleet of 350 to 400 scooters, but once we scale up to the full 750 and ridership and demand is fully met, we'll increase our hiring for up to between 10 to 15 full-time employees. But yeah, we hire locally. These are full-time jobs. They receive health care, full employee benefits. And so that's, for us, that's one of the differentiating factors because it gives us an ability to manage our fleet that, you just can't do in terms of like hiring 1099 contract workers.
All right, thank you. Blanca, I'll try to go through similar questions, maybe a little more briefly, so as not to take up too much time. But if you would just also touch on geofencing and how Bird handles the geofencing issues.
Yes, Blanca Laborde from Bird. So we have been working and having some calls with the City of Omaha staff. We absolutely intend currently to have our scooters slow down or stop in those prohibited areas. But again, as you mentioned, happy that there is some flexibility within the agreement should the City of Omaha wish us to implement or enforce those zones in some other way. But our intention is to stop stop people from riding through or ending their rides in those areas.
Okay. And then as it relates to the scooters and the charging, I think you use a different system for charging maybe than SPIN does?
We have both Bird employees and we have contract chargers. And that's really allowed us to be flexible, particularly during this COVID time. We're now doing a bit of a hybrid model. When the pandemic first began, we needed to be sure that our employees were also able to maintain social distance. And so we started to rely a little bit more heavily on some of our contract workers and change the model a little bit because they are able to manage the fleet of one as a team of one and maintain social distance. We were just concerned with bringing too many scooters with too many employees interacting in our warehouses. So we have been testing that hybrid model a little bit throughout the past few months, and we'll probably do something like that in Omaha as well. So we've got a hybrid Bird employee and 1099 slash manager model.
Okay.
Happy to further discuss that with you.
Sure. One of the things I didn't ask Frank, and but I'm not really going to ask you. I'll highlight it for both of you maybe. Is that, and again, Ms. Korf covered some of this. Is that SPIN access program, so that those who may have some financial issues have an ability to ride at either a reduced or discounted rate. I think Bird's programs include, you have your red, white, and blue, some frequent flyers, preload discounts, and SPIN as their access program. So I appreciate you acknowledging or knowing that some might need some additional assistance who would benefit by using this form of transportation. So I appreciate both of you responding to the RFP with those. I'll ask Blanca to, why don't you, if you want, cover your job creation employment strategy comment?
Yes, so as I mentioned, we will have both Bird employees and 1099 contract workers, as well as a hybrid model that we're also working on, particularly during the pandemic, that is going to, we're going to be engaging people from the community to kind of run their own fleet. And so we intend to continue to do some outreach in the city, as well as work with some of your local workforce development boards in order to pull some candidates to work with us in those capacities.
Okay. Are the Bird nests similar to like the SPIN hubs that Frank explained?
So a Bird nest would be where we deploy scooters, which, yes, they are. What is more similar, but except that it's virtual and dynamic, is the Bird preferred parking. And in that, those parking spots are designated in the app. When you go to end your ride, it will show the spot in the app, and you will be given turn-by-turn directions. On top of that, we will layer certain incentives. For example, if you end your ride in a preferred parking location, you might get a discount. You might get accumulate credits for free rides. We actually experiment with different carrots and sticks because it's very interesting, but every community responds differently. And in some places the carrots work, in some places the sticks work, and in some cases, just simple raffles or recognition on social media work. So we will work on that to see what gives the best incentives for people to properly park in them.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question. I think I need Jennifer Taylor, please. Jennifer, one of the issues last year that seemed to be, that came up in the study and the recap of the pilot program was people using one card for multiple users at once. And I know that's a change in this year's pilot program. So if you wouldn't mind, please explain how that will work this year.
I believe the RFP, and Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the RFP requires that only one person and one identity or one ID can check out a scooter at a time. So we won't have the ability of, say, one adult able to check out a scooter for themselves and for children. So it's one person, one scooter, And that is actually a requirement in both the RFP and the agreement.
And 18 years old.
And
too,
18 years
right?
old,
And-
yes.
And
And
there's
and that
a
is also.
requirement to scan the driver's license the first time.
Correct. And then both scooter companies have agreed to post on the scooters themselves those specific rules, no riding, where you ride, your age, and to please wear a helmet. So those are actually on the actual scooter themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So I appreciate everyone taking the time to, listen to my repeated questions to both companies and to you. I think it's important, though, to show that these pilot programs they're set up to do exactly this. We had one last year. We learned from some good things and not so good things, so we implement those in this program going forward. And I'll be supportive of this because it is a pilot program, to make a determination as to maybe how we move forward, or if we don't, on a permanent basis. I will offer up maybe one amendment, and that's, as I suggested last week when we were talking about the ordinance that goes along with this. The ordinance actually becomes effective on the 23rd of June. So I'd probably offer an amendment to say for the operating agreement that will be signed with the city and both companies, that the effective date of that, so that they wouldn't start before and we wouldn't have that awkward period where the ordinance, the definition of the scooter isn't even on when they're operating. So I would make the amendment that this resolution for both Bird and Spin would not be effective until June 23rd, 2020. And with that, I'll move for.
Just a point of clarification, procedurally, did you intend the effective date of your amendment to be the day before the 24th when the other ordinance goes into effect?
No, I think as well, I'll refer to the clerk. I think it's 15 days. I'm sorry, thank you. I was counting 14. It is 15 days. So let me make that the 24th. Thank you for catching that, Mr. President.
I've got to give a big assist to the clerk. It's whispering in my ear. All right, was there a second to that? Okay. Anything further, Mr. Harding? No. Thank you. Mr. Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I also support the pilot project. I think it is an element of spontaneity and an element of alternative transit for a city our size that's important to explore and maintain, as long as we can tighten things up and put around it the appropriate regulatory structure. And that's what we're talking about here today. A lot of my questions were asked last week, or answered last week as well, around rider safety and proof of age and clutter and how they'd be sanitized, and the maximum speed limits to 15 miles an hour, the complaint line for sure, and as was just noted, the enforcement side of this that is new and was adopted last week as well, that I think is important to be defined and is substantial should things not go well or folks aren't paying attention to some of the rules here. I also thought the geofencing conversation last week was a little squishy, but I think it is better this time. The intention expressed is that in those areas we will slow to stop. I think that's appropriate. And for those that haven't really seen those diagrams or those maps, that generally applies anywhere in the Old Market or anywhere around the CHI Health Center, so areas of high density and pedestrians that might otherwise be concerned about how this operates. So I think that's appropriate too. I seconded the start date amendment. I think that's important for both of these as well, to match them up with the enforcement ordinance. And I'm pleased to hear about the employment plans as well. That's welcome in this time and during this summer to add those levels of employment for the program here in the city and with local hires. Last question, maybe, Hannah, I don't know if you're the right one to answer this or not, but I wanted to address the gentleman's question there about where the scooters will be placed. And I know they're dockless, so it's quite flexible and it can happen along areas of demand and where they see that occurring. But I want to make sure we do have those opportunities in places like North and South Omaha as well.
Hannah Depanu, Public Works. I would say that both companies have expressed a willingness to be flexible with us in those zones where we would like them to deploy. I think that the ridership data from last year will largely influence those areas, but we are not excluding any area, South Omaha, North Omaha, Benson, Blackstone, Exarban. All those areas will be included.
Good. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Festerson. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, but Councilmember Festerson asked a question that I wanted to ask. I wanted to make sure that there were going to be some stations in North Omaha specifically.
Hannah Depanu, Public Works. I can get some locations that you would prefer,
Yes.
and we'll get them included.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. Councilmember Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I had a lot of questions as well. Thank you to Councilmember Harding for getting a lot of those answered. So I expressed last week some questions as well, and the questions are still there for me. I mean, we know that the city should be providing safe and dedicated, protected areas for these scooters and bikes and all the different types of mobility we have. It's just not there yet. And we know, based on the data from what we were given from last year's pilot program, that ridership is going to be weighed down. The city gets a cut of every ride. So this is going to be a question for Frank and Blanca both. And I'm not picking on you, Frank, but as we look at you, it's right to left, so that's the way I work. But I know Omaha's a great city, but I don't have to advise you. You're aware of what we've lost from the CWS to Berkshire Hathaway to the swim trials to Slump Busters to NCAA basketball. These are people in our urban core that would benefit going A to B on these scooters, right? So tell me how it's beneficial to you as a company to express moving forward with another pilot program when you've already had one. How does that work for your company to make money? Frank, please.
Well, yeah, Councilmember Palermo, thank you for the question. Look, to your point, yeah, COVID-19 has presented some very unique challenges in the micromobility industry. But, we've seen ridership, the impact that COVID-19 has had on specific communities or specific pilot programs throughout the country has varied. For example, in Detroit, we've actually seen an increase in ridership because a lot of people don't feel comfortable taking public transit. They don't want to be confined in a bus or a train. And so they're looking for another mobility option that can get them to where they need to go while also practicing social distancing. And we've also created some very unique company initiatives and programs to help address those issues as well. For example, Spin launched the Everyday Heroes program, which provides free rides and free helmets to healthcare workers. We've partnered with some hospitals in Detroit and in Portland where those doctors and nurses and all the healthcare workers are able to have their own personalized scooter as a reliable mode of transportation. In other markets and cities, they've actually increased our fleet cap because we've seen increased ridership as well. And that, again, is all due to people's habits and practices changing because they don't want to take public transit or are looking for a way to move around that's socially distant.
Thank you. And Blanca, the same question, or I can ask it again if you need me to.
Yes, and I will echo what many of the things that Frank said. Certainly, the pandemic and COVID-19 has been a challenge for cities, communities, and businesses worldwide. Nevertheless, we believe that micromobility has a very important role to play because of that built-in social distancing that Frank mentioned. And in addition to some of those programs that we also have to provide free rides for healthcare workers, we're trying to continue to encourage micromobility and economic development. For example, in many cities in which we operate, we now include local businesses that might be open for takeout or delivery within our app, and have also begun to spin up multiple social media campaigns directing residents to go and frequent local businesses. So that has been very beneficial. Additionally, just when we're talking about just the business model, what I talked about earlier, our hybrid employee and contractor model has been really helpful. We always match the number of scooters that we have in the market to the demand. And although demand has come down, we see it coming up, and we do have that opportunity and ability to be flexible. Some interesting data has been coming out of ridership during this period of time. For example, we found that we have seen that rides have gotten longer. Why is the average ride length gotten longer? Well, we probably don't have enough data to know yet, but we have a lot of ideas. One, we think people are probably using them to commute. As Frank said, they might be hesitant to use transit. And, there might also be a situation where people want to be a little bit more social distance than they would be, say, in a ride share, where they might take ride share across town for a 2-mile trip. They might prefer to go ahead and just hop on a scooter and may be able to maintain a little bit more social distance. So we will work together with you and with the community as we try to open up and really restart our economic engine to the benefit of all of the community.
Thank you, and I appreciate both answers. They were really great answers. So again, the ridership is going to be down. The city resources and work that have been put into the scooter program or the pilot program this year are the same. There's one thing I'm hung up on, and I'm just going to be honest, because that's why I'm elected to make this vote, and this is what my constituents feel as well. We don't have these stations in my district as well, even though I have the #1 tourist attraction in the state, in my district, not far from the urban core. So we do need to work on that if this were to get approved today. But there's another thing as well, when we talk about cleaning of the scooters. Now, I was told for about 2 months that I couldn't go to church because of COVID, but I'm hearing from you that we're going to make sure that these scooters get picked up every night and they'll be sanitized down. But there's a difference from the first rider of the day to the last rider of the day that I'm just not comfortable with. So I won't be supporting this year, but it doesn't mean I'm anti-scooter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vice President Palermo. Councilmember Pauls, you're recognized.
Thank you. Frank, I have just a couple questions. Spin, how many cities is your company in?
We were 68 last year throughout the United States, and then we recently launched in Cologne, Germany, about 2 weeks ago.
So you're in 68 cities.
That's correct.
Because I hear a lot of questions that I would think that you would have presented right up front. Maybe you have, and I just wasn't, maybe I was asleep at the wheel. But a lot of the questions the last 2 weeks I've heard are what I call very basic questions. They're questions that I would have expected to be brought up right up front, explained to our staff, so we'd have that information, bam, 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 bam. That's how I see it. Are we that unique?
I'm sorry, you were breaking out there, but if I understand your question, with regards to the Omaha pilot program, it's consistent with most of the programs that, at least for the markets that I oversee. Regarding the application that city staff had made available to all of the vendors to apply for and answer those questions. They were consistent with questions that are typically asked in most pilot programs.
So the questions that we have asked last week and this week, you've heard several times before, at least 60 some times before. Is that correct?
Yeah, typically the concerns that people raise, it's around parking compliance, asking questions around geofencing, the company's practices with managing the fleet, operating the scooters, rebalancing them throughout the city. Yeah, those are all the common questions that cities are concerned about.
In my estimations, those questions should have been should be answered right up front. Either we didn't ask the question, or the information was not. One way or the other, the information wasn't between both groups, because what I've been hearing for the last 2 sessions is what I call a lot of committee work. These things should have been laid out so clear. The majority of the questions, not all of them, because we are unique, but this is our second pilot. In my past experiences, you used the first pilot you were involved in, and you corrected it, and then you awarded the contract. I'm just saying, that's why I had some concerns, because last week I heard that $45,000 was for the administration, city administration, and might break even. There are some of those questions I think could have been answered day one. And I won't ask Bird, because I'm assuming that this would be probably some of the same information would be presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pauls. Councilmember Melton.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say I'm going to support this because it's a pilot program, but I have to say I thought last year was was almost a disaster. The reason I am allowing the pilot for this year is because of the ordinance and the amount of control that I think we're going to have. So I guess the mistakes we learned from last year, I think, hopefully, I see Jennifer nodding back there. All we have is paper right now, right, Jennifer? But I think you've done a good job putting it on paper on what the reality should be this year. So I'm willing to do one more pilot program under the new ordinance that's been drafted and passed. But if this pilot has the same results as last year, with scooters being in front of businesses, with people in wheelchairs having problems getting somewhere, I would have to say that this will be the last summer that I would support having scooters in Omaha. But I have to say, but when I go out and I talk to a lot of young groups, young people just love them. I mean, they want them, they tell me it's fun, it's another means of transportation. And I don't really want to, just because I don't care for scooters, I've never ridden one and I never plan to, I don't want to deny somebody else that really enjoys it, their ability to do that. So, and I do know, I talked to a group of my parents' folks, who I won't give away their ages, but let's just say they're not planning to ride scooters either, and they hate them. I mean, they just despise the scooters. And so you got to balance, I think, a little bit of what the younger generation is wanting to see, what the older generation maybe doesn't want to see, and we kind of try and balance those two. What I'm hoping is that we've done that this year with this ordinance. So I know, Jennifer, do you have any response to that? I guess I'm kind of right in the middle, and that probably actually shows my age too. I don't care really about the scooters because I don't use them. But I don't want to see them laying around everywhere. I don't want them to be a pain. I don't want to see a kid somehow get a hold of one and run into the side of the bus again, right? So I'm concerned about those safeties, but also if adults are riding them, adults should be able to take responsibility for themselves and their actions, and if they don't, we're gonna have fines, and they're gonna be punished accordingly. So what's your thought on that, Jennifer?
I won't get into discussion about my use of scooters. It may show my age as well. But I think what I can say is that from the end of last year's pilot to now, this Park Omaha staff, Parks staff, Omaha Police Department, Fire Department, we had a number of meetings with every single city department to gather input, plus we put together the survey. So we took as much as we could from the past pilot program, also with as much input as we could get to try and make sure that what we did this year at least addressed the concerns that were raised from last year and the things that we learned that were problems. Obviously no one can promise it'll be perfect, but I do think that as Hannah would show, and I think as Frank and Blanca have noted, the RFP we put out this year was far more detailed and asked a number of more questions about how the companies would address several of the current concerns that we had from last year, from education to helmets to signage to parking to clutter. All of that are things that we, to be honest with you, I was part of the initial pilot last year. We didn't know anything about, as this was brand new to us. So I feel that we are far more educated and informed with what we're doing this year than we were last year. We've made every effort to try to at least address all those concerns. And I think it's fair to say that a second pilot will show us how we can manage this kind of a program if possible, having addressed those things that we learned last year.
Well, I want to thank you for your efforts, because without your efforts, I would be voting no today. But because of the amount of work, the people you've met with, the thought you've put into this, meeting with everybody involved, that's where I'm gonna give it a reluctant yes, but it's getting a yes, Spin and Bird, because of the amount of work that Ms. Taylor has put into this. I'm gonna give it one more shot, and then we'll reevaluate
We'll see where we are
next
then.
year. So
Yeah.
thank you,
You're
and
welcome.
that's how they're getting my reluctant yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. Most of these scooters are operated within District 3, which is the district that I represent in the downtown, midtown parts of Omaha, whether you be in the main concentrated core of downtown, whether you be in Midtown Crossing, Blackstone, Exarban Village. That's where you see most of these scooters. And I got an earful from my constituents, the vast majority of whom were really unhappy with the experience of the pilot in year one. There were a few, mostly the younger the person, the more enthusiastic they are, as Ms. Korf pointed out, and the more years the person had, the more they saw these as a nuisance. There were several business owners who were quite upset about the fact that the scooters are just dropped off in front of their businesses. People going in or out of them found them problematic. It was a problem for people exiting businesses because of the volume of scooters who were operating on the sidewalks. It was overwhelming numbers last year. And you ask the people, like I did, other than a handful of hooligans that were just out joyriding, thought it would be more fun to scare people on the sidewalks than to stay on the street. But most people that I encountered, and several of whom that we had a detailed conversation, said they ride on the sidewalks because they don't feel safe on our streets. It's a personal security, comfort, safety decision that they make. So what's the difference between last year and this year? Well, there's this penal code that we felt we had to enact. Really, in my view, woefully inadequate in terms of not providing helmet safety to prevent traumatic brain injuries. But is that really going to be effective? Are we really going to have police, or do we really want our police placed in this position to be ticketing people and chasing them down? It's my view, in speaking with street beat cops, they don't want to be put in that position. They don't want to be in the confrontation with the citizen over you're not where you're supposed to be on a scooter. Okay? And to me, the ones I speak with, they just don't rate it as the significance. Are they going to be around to even see the violations? What is the chance that on a Friday evening or Saturday evening in the Old Market or the Blackstone or Exarban Village we're gonna have police that are, oh, we better do a special enforcement tonight because, you know, it's a weekend in the Exarban Village and those scooters are gonna be out. I don't think so. So are we really, in my view, going to see enforcement that there's this appearance that some in the public wanted in terms of let's do something about improving compliance with where the riders should be and where they shouldn't be? I don't think so because A, it's unrealistic to expect that people who, most of whom that use the scooters are impulse decisions. They're not planned rides, in my view. Two, there's still numerous people who are very inexperienced or relatively inexperienced, and because of that personal discomfort with ridership on this public streets, with conflict with bigger vehicles, with these people who are riding little-wheeled motorized units without helmets that feel very vulnerable, I don't think we're going to have a meaningful compliance change in that regard. And finally, I don't think that there's going to be the enforcement because A, the police just aren't around enough to enforce in any meaningful levels to gain a deterrent effect that you get through enforcement. And they don't want to be in that position from some of the ones that I've talked to. So to me, we're going to have more of the same. But perhaps out of all that, if that's not enough, we have this with the fall when the pilot concluded, the big fanfare announcement from the parking and mobility manager and the administration that this is going to be studied and the city council is going to be kept in the loop. And to find out it didn't even go to the Public Works Committee before being placed on our agenda last week, and now we were originally asked to approve this last week, and now because of Council Member Harding's efforts to lay this over a week, we've had 1 week's discussion. Now that's not Spin's fault. That's not Bird's fault. That's the Parking and Mobility and Administration coming at the last minute to us and then rushing us to make decisions that should be done in a collaborative way, in a more informed way, where we could have had these conversations, we could have had these discussions, and perhaps work through some of them, perhaps not. With the COVID pandemic going on right now, and with the fact that you have multiple riders per day using the same units, and with the other pressing issues going on in our city, the thought creeps into my mind, really, right now, this is when we need to be doing scooters? And so, as the person among others on this council who has been a champion of transportational alternatives and options and mobility and trying to get protected bike lanes like we asked for and were turned down on 32nd Avenue. The neighbors, wanted protection. Then there was discussions there. The Harney Midtown to downtown protected bike lane didn't happen. And seeing that the few bike lanes that we have now, the street sweepers don't even get onto them to clean them up. So we have people who, for example, commute in who are calling me begging, hey, you think the city might get the branches off the Turner Park bike lane by Dewey Park, because it doesn't seem like the city cares enough to get out there after a storm and clean them up, and this is how we commute. To me, I don't think we're really taking this as seriously as we should be, and the timing is poor, and we don't have the sanitation that will protect people. I mean, I really don't see people using scooters wearing protective gloves. I don't see glove dispensing stations or hand sanitizer stations affixed to the hubs that Spin wants to do. And so we have that issue. And I could go on and on and on, but I just don't think 2020 is where our focus needs to be, is on scooters. Our focus needs to be on greater community needs. And we need to take our time, step back, like Councilmember Palermo said, think these things through. We had a year of the pilot, and we are in a short season as it is, and if we have more time to get through these things and work through them and improve this process, maybe 2021. But for me, I just don't think this is the time. I don't think it's the place, and I think it's been rushed. Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, not having very many docked in North Omaha, I had no experience at all as to whether scooters were working well or not. But your arguments just now stated as eloquently as I've heard in a while. You have effectively changed my mind about it. We hadn't seen many in North Omaha, but the concerns that you continue to raise, plus, you know, being on the Douglas County Board of Health and being concerned about COVID-19 to the extent that we are, I think, well, first of all, I'm just going to cut it short and say thank you for your comments, Mr. President, because they helped to shape some of the thinking for some of us here, especially those of us who had not seen very many scooters in my district in order to make a decision in the first place. So thank you for that.
There's a motion and a second.
This is on the amendment.
On the amendment.
Festerson. Gray. This is the amendment.
This is the amendment to change the effective date to June 24.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Roll call.
Festerson. Gray.
No.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
No.
Motion fails 3-4. Item 35, an ordinance levying a special tax and assessment on certain lots, parts lots, and pieces of real estate to cover the cost of clearing snow and ice from sidewalks and sidewalk snow removal district number 2020-01. A is amendment of the whole requested by the Public Works Department.
The public hearing on, oh, it's just the vote today. We had the public hearing on June 9th. Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 36, an ordinance to approve a major amendment to a mixed-use district development agreement for Torrey Square located at 3833 North 153rd Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 36 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, Mark Sanford. I'm the architect for the project, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
That's just a public hearing. Item 37, an ordinance to accept the bid of Spin Linen Management in a total amount of $53,664 to provide towel linen service at 4 golf courses.
Public hearing on item 37 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 38, an ordinance to approve the fiscal year 2020 Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program Award in the amount of $1,151,084.
The public hearing on item 38 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? We have Amanda Huckins on Zoom.
Yep.
Ms. Huckins, are you a proponent wishing to testify in favor?
Yes.
Please proceed. Name and
All right.
address and your testimony, please.
Okay. My name is Amanda Huckins, last name Huckins, and I live at 521 North 33rd Street. I am in support of a resolution to disperse $1.15 million of federal coronavirus emergency supplemental funding to City of Omaha departments for the purpose of controlling the spread of the coronavirus. But I am doubtful about whether the Omaha Police Department and city law are capable of fulfilling their responsibility to public safety in the midst of this pandemic. In fact, I think we've seen evidence over the past several weeks that OPD's actions have increased the likelihood that the virus will spread in Omaha, and that the impact of the spread will disproportionately affect residents of Omaha who have already experienced ongoing injustices, including ones that are incredibly relevant to this particular agenda item. For instance, substantially higher rates of infection and mortality from coronavirus have been recorded for Nebraskans of color across the state and right here in Omaha. As for the city legal department's treatment of folks charged with breaking curfew and how dismissing charges for those with no prior record stands to exacerbate already present inequalities, consider a 2019 report from the Nebraska Crime Commission, which shows that Nebraskans of color are at least twice as likely to be stopped by police compared with white Nebraskans, leading to a higher rate of search and arrest, which increases the probability that they will have some kind of record. One of the most glaring examples of OPD's disregard for public health and safety in the past several weeks has been the erratic and excessive deployment of chemical irritants such as tear gas and pepper balls into crowds of residents exercising their First Amendment right to assemble. On Friday, May 29th, at the intersection of 72nd and Dodge, I witnessed an officer shoot a canister of tear gas into a crowd of people who were standing in a parking lot, chatting with each other in small groups, listening to music, and observing the actions of police in the street and protesters on the sidewalk. This was only one of dozens and dozens of units of irritant that I saw deployed. By the time I left the area, a cloud of chemical irritants hanging in the air for a block in every direction made it difficult not to cough profusely while I walked to my car, even while I was wearing a mask. I have seen video taken by several protesters at 72nd and Dodge on Saturday, May 30th, before 8:30 p.m., and these videos show clouds of chemical irritant engulfing people holding signs, families with children, and volunteer medics as they move through a parking lot. Why would police use chemicals that are specifically designed to inhibit respiration, specifically designed to cause coughing and difficulty breathing during a pandemic involving a virus that attacks respiratory systems? I also wonder if the deployment of the chemical irritants is an activity that is prohibited under the National Environmental Protection Act, Item 5, as noted in the memorandum of Corbin Terry, NEPA coordinator, which is on page 21 of this DESF grant paperwork that's attached to this agenda item. I don't know the answer to that, so I'm just genuinely wondering if chemical irritant used by the police would constitute some kind of a problem with accepting the funds. My confidence in the city legal department's commitment to containing the coronavirus hinges in part on whether the city prosecutor will decide to jail or keep in jail any people who are accused of or plead guilty to breaking a completely unnecessary and unevenly enforced city curfew. Filling jails, which represent the biggest current coronavirus infection clusters in the country right now, would not be a responsible move, especially when the only thing gained by jailing curfew breakers is intimidation of the public. As far as I know, Mayor Stothert has asked for charges to be dismissed only for those curfew breakers who have clean prior records. I agree with the sentiment of the ACLU Nebraska that states, quote, "Imposing different requirements does nothing to make us safer. It just punishes protesters with firsthand experience of our broken criminal system for speaking out against it," end quote. I'm asking you as the City Council to do everything within your power and influence to ensure that the Omaha Police Department and City Law Department do not counteract, by acting irresponsibly, the virus containment that this $1.15 million grant could assist. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Huckins. We have no one else registered online. We'll now call for any other proponents in favor that are here.
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Birch Street. We've been talking about responding to COVID-19 for a few months, and one of the main components is funding expenses and recovery efforts and prevention. So that's why I am supporting this, that you get the money moving. Earlier today at the commissioners meeting, there was also other discussion on COVID relief, and I want to take this opportunity to encourage the council members to speak directly to the board of Douglas County, because they're the ones that are going to be making decisions, and they need to hear from you guys. I often wonder what your communications looks like, so I appreciate when you guys talk about who's communicating what, and I mean not who, but what's being communicated. That's a discussion that that happened today, and there was some positivity because of the partnership that needs to happen with governmental entities collecting these funds to respond to COVID in a monetary way. And also as an aside, as Ms. Amanda Huckins said, that the curfew response violations by the city prosecutor, he needs to be encouraged, Matt Kuzi needs to be encouraged to just drop the charges, and so we can move on to finding solutions, demands, or meeting demands. We all have demands, and so forth. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify in favor of this item? Now move to the opponents. Anyone wishing to testify in opposition to item 38? Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Markel Riley. So I've got some statements specifically in regards to Stothard's announcement on dropping charges for the peaceful protesters.
You have to, first of all, the clerk pointed out we need your name and address, and then your testimony has to be tied into item 38, because this is the question's been called.
What is it?
It's about public safety for the coronavirus. Just spin it. Use what you're saying and spin it. It's all the same. It's all the same.
If I continue speaking, I need you to let me speak. So I don't want any interruptions if I'm going to say something.
The rules of the debate
But it isn't in line with what you're asking.
As pointed out, you have to give your name and address.
Okay.
And then the question before the council specifically is the matter presented by agenda item number 38. So your comments began to talk about something other than that. So,
Yeah, for sure.
okay. We'll let you come back.
Yeah, that's fine.
Next opponent, please.
Hello, everybody. Mr. President, how you doing today?
Welcome back.
Thank you. My name is Malik. I'm sure you know my address because a lot of people have been driving past my home since the last time I've been here. 4925 Manderson Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68104. I'm against this because I just want to know, how are we passing out $1.15 million now and the coronavirus has been going? I'm not understanding how, I mean, if we're talking about the coronavirus was going on when we lost an innocent life downtown. Was that not on the agenda then? I just want to know, where were your brains when the senseless killing happened? But this was not on the agenda. So why is this an issue now? For the police? They didn't police us. Y'all needed the National Guard, and Washington, D.C. didn't even deploy them when you guys did. So I'm just trying to understand, what do they need $1.5 million for? They haven't been doing their job. Do they need $1.5 million for therapy, for training, for mental stability training? Is that where this is going? Because it couldn't be going to the coronavirus. I'm trying to understand, project extended January 20th. Okay, we've been losing people since then. To extend for 2 years to prevent, to prepare, and respond to the coronavirus. So is any of this money going to the lives lost in the midst of the coronavirus? I'm trying to understand. I guess not. And then I wanted to touch on, same subject, 1 second. about simplifying the answers. Y'all can't expect for the community to come, and some people get like tense and they shy away because you use all these big words and calculated guesses, just like the last people who came from Public Works, and I'm so glad you held them accountable for the people who were for it. I don't understand which community did you speak to then, but if we're talking about coronavirus, that matter should not even be here either. I'm so glad you asked, and you asked what is going on. Brings us back to the topic of number 38. Why are we speaking about it now? I'm not understanding. So when you guys understand and realize that $1.15 million is not needed, then you'll be able to appease the public, and the public would greatly come down here and thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to testify in opposition to item 38?
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Anthony. Last name is hyphenated, Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S, hyphen W-R-I-G-H-T. My address is 618 North 41st Street.
Welcome.
Thank you. I think that my main opposition to this is we have not seen a line item budget for how this money would be utilized. And I think that you've lost the trust of the people with how you spend our money, since 40% is dedicated to funding a police department we don't trust, and only 0.2% of the city's budget is spent on racial justice. Now, since we are talking about coronavirus, there is an axiomatic nexus between coronavirus and racial justice, in the sense that the majority of the people who are dying and being infected are Black and Indigenous people. To what the brother said, I'm wondering now that it isn't starting to infect white people, if that is why the city council all of a sudden has an interest in it. Coronavirus is tied to racial justice because we need to make sure that none of this money is going to the police departments at all. The police departments just do not enjoy the trust of the community right now. And we need to know that we're going to be safe if we have to leave our homes in the middle of the night for an arbitrary and unconstitutional curfew to go seek help. How do we know that some of those people who were arrested were not victims of coronavirus and were like simply just trying to go and get medical attention? To that end, the only thing that would make sense as part of this funding is to release all the charges against 300 protesters who were acting peacefully, injunctive relief for the people who pled guilty and are serving jail time or served jail time, and also to drop all charges for people who previously pleaded not guilty. So I think that if you do want the full support of this community, we need to see a line item budget. And the final thing that I'll say is that these coronavirus funds can also be used for a public health threat that has been a scourge in this city for far too long, and that is the health threat of white supremacy and racism, which also has to do with the coronavirus, because white supremacy and racism is exactly the reason why Black and Indigenous people are being hit first and worst, just like they're being hit first and worst by climate change, just like they're being hit first and worst by miscreant police departments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to testify in opposition to this item? I want to give you a second chance if you want to come back. Okay. Public hearing is closed.
Item 39, an ordinance to award the bid of Alexander Lawn and Landscape, Inc. in the annual amount of $19,502 to provide grounds maintenance services at various police facilities for the period of 3 years.
The public hearing on item 39 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 40, an ordinance to establish a new Class B flammable liquids storage district to be known as District Number B-205, located at 10626 I Street.
The public hearing on item 40 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Non-action items, items 41 through 52 do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
Roll call.
Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.